Got to get you in the picture here. There you go. All right. So welcome to SARUG 2014 June meeting. This may be the only meeting we have this year. at the rate we've been going. At the rate we've been going. So Steve said he was going to share some of his experiences speaking at the Australian RTC, which he just got back from, right? Yeah.
4 days ago. Or 3 days ago. 4 days ago. I get confused.
So what's happening down under?
A lot. But the biggest takeaway from the RTC had nothing to do with the RTC. We actually were able to get a presentation from the lead architect for Sagrada Familia. And come to find out that Sagrada Familia is a BIM project. Do I have your attention? It's on my blog from day one.
Well, they had to reconstruct what they thought, because I mean he did have drawings for everything.
He had no drawings.
Yeah, I mean they had to kind of project his design as to what he intended to do based on what he'd already established, right?
Well, I'll tell you what happened. Some guy from England named Mike Burke, he's a professor and he was an architecture student, came over from Oxford, went to Sagrada Familia in 1975, and basically never left. He just fell in love with the place. And he volunteered to try and put together the model, because there are pieces. I mean, during the Spanish Civil War, they actually shattered it, but the pieces are still there. But nobody knew how to put them together, because if you look at a jigsaw puzzle, if you see a piece with a red piece, you just know to go look for a piece with red. And you can start to put it together. But with Gaudi's work, good luck. I mean, those pieces, no one even knew. And you could kind of fake it, and that's what he did for a couple of years. And it wasn't until, and he knew he had to understand how Gaudi designed. And it wasn't until a couple of years that he worked on it that he was flying over the Alps and he saw the mountain ranges. And suddenly it clicked in his head what Gaudi was doing. He was actually working with contours. And he designed what was, in essence, the very first parametric model that drove all his work. And that is, if you take two donuts and tie strings in between them and then start twisting them, you get those curves. And depending on how you design the model, the parametric model is driven by either the height of it, the circumference of it, or the amount of rotation. And then if you take that and you intersect it with another one with different parameters, you end up with these scallops and these ridges that are basically what Mother Nature does with mountain lines. Mountain ridges intersect with each other. So when you fly over a mountain range, you'll actually see Gaudi's facade, because that's what drove the parametrics. And what he figured out in 1980-something was it only took 9 points on a computer to generate the geometry to then give it to a CNC machine. And it took him then another 10 years to develop the software and actually do this on computers and get it to where then he could drive the saw, and then to find a stone cutter that understood the complexity of CNC machining and all that to drive the computer to drive the saw. And that's why suddenly in the last 10 years of construction has just boomed on Sagrada. So to have him get inside Gaudi's head,
yeah,
and then see him come up with the computer models to drive it parametrically, it's straight BIM, because everything Gaudi did was in model. You know, he only sketched enough to interpret his model so that he could then go to a better model. The guy really was very cool.
Well, since it was a Revit conference, was Revit involved in this?
Oh, God, yeah. Still, the RTC, Revit Technology. So he was just the keynote speaker.
Okay, but he didn't use Revit to develop the model?
Oh, gosh, no. This was all prior to even really computers.
Okay.
You know, this was like the very first computers that were tape-driven in 1978, 79, 90, 80, rather. They were still all tape-driven in Cobalt and Fortran, and what he used was cartography to drive contours, and that's how he figured out how to get the basic forms that he was trying to do, get them to intersect, because that's what contour maps do.
So who did the Revit model?
No one. There's no Revit model.
What's the model you showed me? You showed me what looked like a...
It's a physical model.
Oh, that's the physical model.
That's the physical model. They just finished it about a week ago, 2 weeks ago, he said. They now know what the glory facade looks like. They never knew.
Was that the CNC model that had been?
No, that's actually a hand-built model carved out of plaster and cement, and then they use that now to then drive the rest of the model. That is, a lot of it's being done in 3D AutoCAD. So, but for the most part, it's CNC machining. They just interpolate the model into the 9 coordinates, and the coordinates are being fed to the stone cutter. All those columns are nothing more than 2 distinct forms superimposed and carved out of each other. And you can do all that with a CNC machine. The guy developed the saw to do it.
Cool.
So that alone was like the most amazing thing. And then the other thing that was really interesting is to see where laser capture is going. And this is what I suspect, because I know a guy here in the States, that's Kelly Cohn from Beck. I mean, he's driving laser technology beyond what anything we imagine. So it's now gotten to the point to where with laser, pretty soon you won't have any drawings whatsoever.
Good.
Yeah.
I've been looking forward to that.
There pretty soon, within 5 years, there'll be no drawings. Because everything will be driven by a laser scan, and it'll be points which you can then model on top of or leave alone. And one of the things I saw that we'll have to turn that off. I saw a couple of things I can't even talk about, but a lot of this you can now do drawings based on the lasers. To where you don't have to duplicate it in Revit. You can actually leave it as a 3D image, especially if it's context. If you're doing a remodel and you don't want to remodel the entire building, you're just affecting one piece of it, you can leave the scan alone, the point cloud, and then model off of that where you're affecting it. Kind of the way we did when you brought in AutoCAD files.
Yeah.
If you were doing a large building, you just import an AutoCAD file and then model in Revit the part that you're affecting. That way you show the context of the whole project. That whole thing is going to be done in laser precision because the technology has gotten mind-blowing. Mind-blowing. I saw some images that just looked like most amazing watercolors. They just look like watercolor. They're absolutely beautiful. So.
Oh, cool.
And then.
Tell us about your speech.
I was intimidated this time around. First time I've ever been intimidated at an RTC. Everybody there was 20 million times smarter than me. Everybody there was doing Dynamo, API, programming, automation, driving manufacturing. It was only maybe 60% architects. The rest were all BIM managers, contractors, huge companies. Most people at the RTC are 500-man firms, 2,000-person offices, huge people. And some of them are just really smart. And here I come with my graphics. But, I've learned something. I teach graphics to beginners, and they say, oh, this is over our head. I teach it to gurus, self-proclaimed, and they're bored. But yet I look at all their presentations and their competition entries, and they're terrible. They still don't understand graphics. So it's kind of like they don't know enough to know still they got to present this in 2D or on a screen. So it's kind of like I don't care how much of a guru you are. There's certain things, thank goodness, we were taught. So my graphics class actually went over well.
Good.
And the lab was a ball because most of the labs were a failure this year. They were over everybody's heads. In most of these conferences, when you go to a quote-unquote lab, you're in a room full of computers. The presenter will give you an example, and you follow along. And then there's people in the audience that kind of help you along if you get lost or confused. Every lab I saw was so over everybody's head for the most part. It was like people just sat there and stared and the guy did a presentation rather than a lab. And there were a couple exceptions, but the ones I was in was kind of that way. And I said this time, there's no way I was doing that. I wanted to do a real lab. So I took 10 minutes to show them the pieces that I wanted them to learn. I gave them everything, a model, my full presentation tools. I gave them all my people, my sunsets, you name it, all inside of a Revit file. And said, here's a sheet of paper to do a presentation. You got another 20 minutes. And then I just walked around. So it was fun to watch 60 people play with my design. Really fun to see what 60 people did to it. I had one guy turn it into a gold building. He turned the whole thing into gold. It was really cute.
Midas touch.
Yeah, it was like a solid gold building. It was like, wow, this could be in Vegas. So that was fun. So I'm hoping that, and people seem to have fun. Yeah. And I kept telling them, this is still Lego. It's supposed to be fun.
Yeah.
You know, so ignore what you may have thought this is about. This is about drawing a pretty picture and selling a story. And once they got a hold of that, you could tell they were actually having fun. So
Yeah.
that was my experience.
Cool. All right.
And Australia rocks, by the way. If you ever get a chance to go, it's every bit what you hope it would be.
Nice.